Whoops, good morning and welcome to day 2. It is a great opportunity for us now to shift our focus from regeneration of soils in farmland, in cultivated land, if we dare say that in a regenerative approach where we're trying to reduce the literal cultivation, and moving to grazing, a really important conversation with regard to the amount of acres in the world that are managed or mismanaged, we should say, with regard to how animals are impacting the planet and our human element as to how we are looking at and caring for that. We have learned over the years, many of us at least, is that when we graze in a very different way, we shift the direction of degradation towards restoration. We can stop the spread of deserts, we can return biodiversity, we can return water flow. And these opportunities are so encouraging as to what the potential is. This morning we have a chance to listen to a world expert to kick off our discussion today on this very, very topic. As a matter of fact, Dr. Daly and team here have actually brought to us as a Hollywood star, and I can say that clearly because Alejandro Carrillo has one of the featured participants in the film, was it not Kiss the Ground, but Common Ground, thank you. I didn't have enough coffee yet this morning. But Alejandro, when you look at that film, and then if you've looked at pictures or seen articles on the work that he has done in the deserts of Mexico, it's so dramatic that it shows us if we turn that much land from not photosynthesizing very much carbon dioxide to massively photosynthesizing carbon dioxide, we sort of attain pretty rapidly that conversation that Christine Jones challenged us to think about. If we increase photosynthesis 5% on the planet, we could negate our emissions. So this is some of the most hopeful discussions we could have today. Alejandro has, with Desert Grasslands, his organization that really is focusing with regard to changing our understanding of how we manage lands. He actually is working, I was very happy to hear this morning, with the Department of Defense. And you know, our military holds lots of landscapes, and in my experience, often mismanages them the way a lot of us have over the years. So this is an encouraging kind of good news for me. The greening of the Chihuahuan Desert with regenerative grazing practices is the topic we get to explore with Alejandro today. With that, please join me in welcoming Alejandro Carrillo.
Hello? Oh, great. Can you hear me well? Good morning, all. I think I better, well, I'm going to take it here. So I'm very happy to be back to California. I always love to be here on this beautiful state. And I'm going to share with you some of our experiences that we have had working in the Chihuahuan Desert. You like tequila? I brought a box of tequila. Let me tell you, the last time I was in California, and then we were on a ranch, California, and then they were growing grapes, and then we got a little thorny bush. And for me, thorns mean that, okay, nature is speaking to us, saying, don't touch me, you need me here, and probably you had to improve the work you're doing. So I bet that lady here in California about that, if she was going to grow more grass, that thorny bush was going to go away. And then she didn't believe me, the owner, and then we bet a bottle of wine versus a bottle of tequila. But it's gonna take us a while to get that. So why I brought tequila? Because everybody knows tequila, but the problem is that in central Mexico, we are creating blue deserts. And you can see on this picture. So 99.9% of the tequila that you drink is coming from that kind of land. A monoculture, compacted, eroded land. But we were actually very fortunate that a guy in the state of Jalisco in central Mexico, he knew about soil health and he called us to help him. What was unique about this guy, he was very open to change. He was very experimental, which is very critical on doing things different. And, well, that's still, Remember, this picture and the next picture was taken on the same day. So what we use to regenerate the land? Just livestock. We did not seed anything. We didn't actually put any spray in anything. Nothing, just the power of livestock. We didn't even put cover crops. Because remember, that is the context in central Mexico. You're talking about probably 18 to 25 inches per year. It just let's rest it first, because they were even using chemicals to compact the soil, to make sure that nothing grows, to keep the soil bare. And then let's say, okay, so what my friend did was, or the client, let's set aside this row of agave, and let's try this, and then try that, and then try that. And there were some agave that died. Imagine you should see the agave as a livestock. You want to make a change? I'm not saying you kill your livestock, right? But you got to get rid of some livestock that may not adapt. So we only use livestock, but in multiple different livestock. And then nature start to help us. Nature sends some insects that are going to predate on the pests because we stop using chemicals. And I want to share something with you. When Gabe Brown, some of you may know Gabe Brown, went down to my ranch in summer, he told me, Alex, well, because once we cross the border, I'm Alex. I'm Alejandro here. So I had never seen so many insects anywhere where I am in any of the 50 states in the US. I think we're using so many chemicals in the US. So that's what we use. We use donkeys, we use cattle, we use horses, we use sheep. And obviously that was a big learning curve for them because as many farmers or specialty crops, they don't know how to use livestock in sync with nature. It's not just, oh, leave it there. No, we need to work on the rest periods, we need to work on the frequent moves, we need to work and then, and then observe because every context is different. Now let's go back to the drier area, the state of Chihuahua in northern Mexico. Yeah, everybody knows what a Chihuahua is, right? Well, they are from my state. You can see them on the hills. Just be careful when you go out of the highway because they may kind of chase you. They're small, but they bite. But Chihuahua is quite diverse. You can see Chihuahua as probably New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of parts of the western. We had the Ponderosa pine. We had big canyons. That's the Ponderosa pine in the state. It does snow. These pictures were taken 2 months ago. It does snow obviously more on the high mountain range. And then we have extremes as well, We have grasslands, we have the mountain range, we have the sand dunes. And one of the most beautiful things we're doing in Chihuahua is that we have ranchers doing regenerative, holistic, rational grazing in every elevation and in different precipitations. And everybody there is being successful. And the basic question we ask is, Would you do it again? Yes. Or would you go back to where you were? No way. So that's a very fundamental question. So this is the Chihuahuan Desert, the largest desert of North America. And just want to show you a video of how it looks like right before I get to my ranch. I mean, it's all eroded, unproductive. If we used to have one cow for every 20 hectares, now we have one cow for every 100 hectares, and it's still going down. Because you need to keep in mind, folks, that if any of you tells me, you know, Alejandro, I think I'm about the same as 10 years ago, I think you're lying to me. Because we cannot stand still. We need to understand that. We're going forward or going backwards, but we just cannot stand still because we're working with nature. And nature is quite a complex system. So whatever kind of management you have is taking you forward or backwards. And that's where we need to be very keen into observing what's going on. But one very important aspect here is to consider the ecological historical perspective. Because some people, I mean, we go to some deserts and they tell us, don't touch that because it has a biocrust. Well, let's go to the history of this place. And then, I don't know if you saw this gully on that video, the past video. Well, it gives us some clues of how our place used to look like. There is, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's like more than 3 feet of carbon in the soil. It's impossible for mesquite or any other woody plant to put almost a meter of carbon in. What is that telling me? That's telling me that those were tall grasslands. See the fence hanging in there? Imagine all this degradation just took place 50 years in the desert. Oops. The other clue or more written evidence of how the Southwest used to look like is on that book. It was an expedition going from Santa Fe in 1776, trying to find a way to get to Monterey, California. And they passed by Utah, Salt Lake, and the priests said that they haven't seen such a beautiful grasslands in the whole New Spain. So yeah, there's been some degradation. Now we have these kind of documents also, more recent documents, where this is specifically to our state, that it says, well, I'm not sure if they told you that this is kind of a crash course in Spanish. It's included, you don't have to pay extra for that. So the climate was very nice. I mean, we have measured the temperatures in the soil in early morning in summer, and where there's bare ground is 160 Fahrenheit. Where we have grasslands is 75. So there were all kinds of wildlife here, antelope, bisons, leopards. Well, leopards means like the mountain lion. But the ones that really got my attention is otters and beavers. We used to have otters and beavers all across the state. You follow all roads and you're gonna see where the springs used to be, because the beast, I mean the livestock need water, mules and bulls and all that stuff. Now, let's get to our ranch in particular. So our ranch has a mountain range. It does snow, not that much, but sometimes it gets cold. And this is a rainfall pattern, folks. We pretty much rely on, because we don't have snow anymore. I mean, when I was a kid, we got some a feet or 2 feet of snow every year. Not anymore. I mean, things are changing. Now, we need to do the kind of management that whatever we grow on the monsoon, the 3 months, is going to last us for the next 18 months at least. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, but how would you make your cows eat all forage? If we know that the best point to graze grass is at the optimal point or on a vegetative stage. Well, in the rangeland where we are selecting our cattle to thrive on stockpile. And when you start correcting the water cycle, you're always going to have something green at the bottom. Because yeah, we understand that cattle gotta have something green. Now, why is it so important to have something green in our ranches? It's not only for cattle, it's for the macro herd, the microbiology. Because we need a plant that keeps doing photosynthesis year-round. Otherwise, you're shutting down the whole microbiology, right? So the cows need a little bit of green in winter to do well. And then what happens when we graze the whole thing down, but you don't provide enough long rest periods. So remember, every time we open the gate, and actually we're moving twice a day nowadays. We started moving once a week, and then every 2 days, and then once a day, and then we say, well, let's move twice a day. Why? Because one of the most difficult things on ranching is to keep consistency on everything. Consistency on the genetics, consistency on the nutrition. So during the spring, we were used to graze very short grass because, you know, our rest periods were very short. And I have seen that in California quite often. People are doing a pretty good job, but they're going too soon to the same paddock or pasture. So that is also overgrazing, guys. It's not just taking the whole thing out, it's just returning too soon. So we let our grass to actually grow, put a seed head, rest it there, and then maybe we're gonna go back in a year or so. So in the spring, when you have that spring flush, our cows don't lose weight because we're not only should be looking at diversity, we should be looking at the stage where you're grazing those grasses. So if you combine that spring flush or monsoon flush, whatever we call it, right, with a stockpile yellow gold grass, the cow, you're allowing the cows to select the diet, so you will have a consistent manure and they will not lose weight. I think that's a very important point for to justify a long rest period. So just to give you an idea, the last 2 years, we only got 7 inches. I mean, our area is about 9 inches per year, but that's where it helps to cut stockpile grasses, grasses in reserve. Unfortunately, in a lot of places that I'm seeing in the western US and obviously northern Mexico, the trend is going downwards. But, so what do we do? Well, these now are videos from our ranch. We use livestock. We bunch it, we move it, so they work the land. I'm not concerned about my livestock taking too much of the grass, as long as we can keep them happy. I mean, if we always select things, we call often. That is another issue that I have seen in many ranchers, because most of the work that I do is in the U.S., Western U.S., and they are not hard enough to call often. We call every month. Remember, when we go and move the cows, we're wearing two hats. The herder, that the livestock trust us, they follow us, but also the predator role. So if we see our cows, and there are some cows that are losing body condition, that has a dinky calf, any kind of issue that requires extra time, that is a cow that we may call it. I don't even care if it is pregnant or not. I mean, that cow has to go because it's taking us extra time. So we're very flexible, in our grazing. For example, we just grazed this part, and then we took out the electric fence, the poly wire, and now they're grazing the next spot. Now, some people may ask here, so what are your densities? It really depends, folks. Depends what we see in front of us. If it is an area with very little grass, we just open up. So our flexibility is the size of the paddocks. We don't play with the time. We always move in the morning and the afternoon. But the size of the paddock is really what gives us the adaptation to the current conditions. If it is a good year, we can go up to 1,000 paddocks on let's say 20,000 grazable acres that we have. If it is a bad year, we go back to 360 paddocks. And this is one of the things that we've been able to achieve, folks. Remember, we didn't burn anything, we didn't spray anything, we didn't do any mechanical work. We did not think that we could grow what we call this is giant grass or green sprangletop. We didn't even put the seed there. It was there. And you know what was before this grass? Weeds like this high, even when riding your horse. Like huge weeds. And I was concerned. I said, wow. And remember, we are taking long rest periods. I said, wow, they're going to throw a lot of seed. Do you know, they never show up again because we changed the conditions. We changed the conditions in such a way that now we favor perennial grasses, but we don't need, or nature determines that we don't need the weeds anymore. So these are or used to be our winters. Remember the three colors, right? Gold, green, and gray. We want to keep ourselves into the green and gold. Gray doesn't benefit any or livestock, wildlife, or the macro herd. So a lot of bare ground. Now these are winters, folks. Very different story. I work with a lot of conservancies, like bird conservancy, because a lot of birds coming from Montana, the Dakotas, they go and overwinter in the Chihuahuan Desert. And one thing that is so ingrained in our minds is we need to get rid of this, we need to kill this, we need to kill that. So I remember the first times that they show up in my ranch, they told me, we need to get rid of the creosote because it's taking its, well, you change that slide, and instead of creosote, you put juniper, shoya, mesquite, you name it. And the idea was, let's kill it, because it's taking over your ranch. I think what we need to do, guys, is look at the mirror and saying, well, I think I'm the problem here, is the management, so what can I do? So based on their opinion, they say that creosote, in this case, doesn't allow the grass to grow. Well, I think what happened in my ranch is that the grass never read the books. It will not only grow where it's supposed not to grow, but it will kill the creosote. So you can see a fence line comparison, perimeter fence, where in the spring, no winter, we got the green up in our side, and the neighbor's grasses are still dormant. It's all about management. Then in summer, we can grow more grass on the right side than the neighbor. And you know what? We are running 4 times more cattle per acre than the neighbor. I'm a bit disappointed that sometimes conservationists, I work with a lot of them and they're my friends, don't get me wrong, but they say, well, there's something wrong with your ranch. Lower your stocking rate. That's not the problem many times. You're just breaking that rancher. We need to change the management. That is the main problem. So this is another picture that I was driving to my ranch on the same day with the same precipitation. I pass by the neighboring ranch on the left side, and then I get to my ranch on the right side. Remember, no irrigation, just management, mimicking nature. Yeah, well, a little bit of irrigation, I'm just kidding. Well, God's irrigation, right? Rain. So, finally, because we ranchers love the production side and, just sitting there looking at the cows and never take the picture on the same spot, but we finally took this picture. Well, I do finally took this picture. So, bare ground, folks, right? Then, 3 years after, some weeds. We love weeds. Because what we need to think always how nature is trying to help me. Nature is trying to also keep life going. And if you have compacted soils, then you're going to have these taproot plants, which most ranchers hate. But that is kind of a succession process. Now, 3 years after, grasses. Just remember, just the power of livestock. And then, the guy from France asked me to do this study on what we observe when there's bare ground all the way through. So the trees that used to be there is that they're going to take a while, because you're going to fix the water cycle with the grasslands. And then the trees that were originally there are going to come up. And the trees that were not there originally, like in my case, mesquite and creosote and some other bushes, they're going to go away. Well, I was talking to one of you, I don't know where you are, but about the Aplomalo falcon. So the conservationists, which we work very close with them, they were blaming the cows because the cows were scratching on that yucca that we call palmilla, because we have different yuccas. And that's where the Aplomado falcon nests. And I said, well, no, I don't think that's the problem. The problem is the loss of habitat, because this yucca, this is not in my ranch, it's in my way to the ranch. I only see yuccas where there's grass. And exactly the same happened when I was in Australia. I mean, a lot of bare ground, they have beautiful trees, and they are actually losing the diversity of trees because those trees that they have were depending on the grasslands. And if you go to Central Texas, it's the same deal, where you had all these people concentrated in this small, well, not small area, but in Dallas and Austin and Fredericksburg and all that stuff. A lot of people bought ranches, and everybody wants to have a cow and a horse, right? And they have that bare ground, and now they're losing the oaks, because the oaks were depending on the grasslands, and now we can see more mesquite and more cactus than the Chihuahuan Desert. So just relate that. The trees that we like are going away because the grasses were actually helping with the water cycle, and the trees need more water. So this is like just trying to break a paradigm. Because many people say, well, Alejandro, this is horrible. This is bare ground. For me, it's not that bad, guys, at that point in time. Because nature is trying to keep the seeds in the soil, so nature actually creates that hard pan. I mean, obviously, we need to work on that. Grasshoppers. Who doesn't love grasshoppers? Why do we have grasshoppers? That is the question, folks. Because our grasses or plants are weak, or soils are compacted, lack of microbiology. So nature, remember how nature is trying to help or tell me, nature is sending the grasshoppers to convert that poor plants into something better for the soil. Thistle. Oh my God, we hate thistle. We're going to kill it, spray it, burn it. The only place that has seen thistle is in compacted soils. It will not show up on healthy soils. It's nature trying to help you to actually open up the soil. And so on, you know. I mean, all kinds of weeds that it just a matter of time that they're going to go away if we do good grazing management. So this is not too far from our ranch. Obviously, that was because of overgrazing, like set stocking. They never moved the cows. But also, I have seen the problem that in a lot of the western U.S., except a few areas, right, more humid, moist areas, now we're losing a lot of grasslands because of the lack of animal impact. Because we got into this vicious cycle. It doesn't rain, then lower the stocking rates, and then even if every rancher in the western U.S. know how to do proper grazing, we don't have enough livestock. The thing that they tell us that there were like 100 million bison, I think I don't believe that. Probably there were hundreds of millions of bison, and then we need way more cattle than what we have right now to restore or stop the certification. The other thing is that the North American grasslands were actually not grasslands, were forblands. And that's where we are trying to push ranchers to raise the bar on what they should expect. Well, it's got a little bit, so there's a verse in the Bible that says, the promised land of milk and honey. Why do you need, folks, to produce milk and honey? Forbs. Have you measured the breaks on a forb versus a grass? Or a wheat versus a grass? It will always beat the grass in energy and protein. But why don't we have more forbs? Because forbs really require a better water cycle. So in order for us to have forbs, well, obviously bees need forbs, right? Because they need flowers. Grasses don't produce flowers. So our best forbs, like this one, in my context, they grow among the grasses. They need the grasses the same way the original trees need grasslands, well-established grasslands. So that's how I want my ranch to look like, colorful, because that's what's going to make my cows fat, and that's going to help with a lot of the bee population. We don't want to just see grasslands. We want to see forbs among the grasslands, but we need to have a good soils and good water cycle. How are we doing with the time? Because I'm running out of stories. No, just kidding. 45 minutes. I already spent 45 minutes? Oh. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Now, the other thing is that we always think about the diversity of plants, wildlife. How about the diversity of livestock? If we're really, truly mimicking nature, why we don't have more than one kind of livestock? I mean, I don't recommend like ranchers just go full-fledged with the multiple species because each species is, but I say, well, let's put donkeys on the mix. Because there's a study done by Yale. I mean, in Africa, the herders, I think it was specifically in Kenya, were complaining about the zebras. And then these guys from Yale did a study. They couldn't do the study with the zebras, but they put donkeys. And they realized that the cattle from the herders performed better when the donkeys were part of the herd than without donkeys. And you know, the thing that I like about the donkeys, besides like predation control or something like that, is that they can take a lot of the low quality stuff. I don't want to force my cows to take the stems but the donkeys can take the stems. So the purpose of me having donkeys is actually to do a more even grazing. And then I don't have to change fences, and then in my mountain range, they always higher than the cows, and I want to graze the whole thing, not only. So they've been a good addition. Now, some people may say, so what do you do with the donkeys then? You know, seeing the state of a lot of land in the western US, I think donkeys would be the best animal to actually revert, because cows are more, they need better diet. Instead of us having donkeys, this a bunch of donkeys in public land, let's make them work. Remember, I'm talking about burros, donkeys, not politicians, okay? So, and then in Australia, they asked me, so what do you do with the donkeys? Do you eat them? Well, yes, we eat them. We don't know we're eating donkey, but we eat them. So, I don't know, I'm gonna find a market for the donkeys. I mean, you can sell donkeys in Mexico, not as good as cattle, but, and then, well, we, in our mountain range, we are raising mountain lions. But with this kind of management, you're growing a lot of wildlife. You're growing a lot of these javelins, a lot of mule deers, a lot of everything, including predators. So it was a never-ending game, me killing and my neighbors killing the mountain lions. So I now tell people, I raise the mountain lions, and they go and kill my neighbor's cows. Because mountain lions really don't like the herd. It's not like the coyotes, right, that they don't care going in through the cows. I mean, they don't like, and then donkeys have been a good addition to prevent more predation. Look at what the crazy donkeys are. They're all even eating the ocotillo. So I ask you about the photosynthesis. I really like this picture, folks, because the left side is a ranch nearby my ranch, and the right side is my ranch. And I cannot play hardball with this picture because I asked some experts, can you tell me what kind of grass are these? They told me, oh, the left side is tobosa grass. How about the right side? We haven't seen that grass. It's the same grass, folks. It's just different management. The grass is in winter. Remember, we don't want to have gray color, oxidized. We want to have green or yellow. That is our target. So with good grazing management, see how the grass change in shape? That's one of the indicators we have. We have the leaf to stem ratio. As you improve your grazing management, your grasses should have more leaves and less stems. And you need to get rid of that program of the government, CRP, I think CRP, right? Of not observing and just setting a time, let's say, okay, you cannot touch this for 10 years. But I have seen all that grass in those CRP ground oxidize. That's why there's a time to graze. I mean, time that the grass is telling you, hey, please graze me, because otherwise I'm gonna turn into nothing good for anyone, any living thing. So remember, now, the question that I have for you is, why the grass changes from very stemmy to very leafy? I mean, more leaves than stems. And cows, cows and sheep loves leaves. If they have the opportunity, they will not eat the stems. The reason is that as we feed the microbiology, the microherd is asking the grass to actually expand the solar panels, because we are more underground. We're growing, so we need bigger panels, and that's when the grass says, okay, I need to put more leaves. And this is good for everybody. I pull, these are the same grasses as this previous picture. I pull the grass on the left. It has shallow root system. It's perennial. I mean, this is a perennial grass. Shallow root system, because compacted soils. because of the lack of proper grazing. The right side, I have to cut it. Not even my donkeys will be able to pull it out. Because remember, the root system will go as far as there's water and air in the soil. I don't care, and I don't mind how much rain you get. If you have compacted soils, the root system is gonna go sideways because it needs to breathe. So the major limitation on grass productivity is not water, it's air in the soil. And the only way to create air in the soil is by feeding the microbiology, the mycorrhizal fungi, to create aggregation. So how do we deal with these invasive species? Where we are just, our philosophy is to work for what we want and forget the rest. We don't deal with mesquite, we don't deal with creosote, we don't deal with cactus. Actually, cactus is one of the easiest things to kill with the grasses. And let me tell you, I have seen cactus, wow, in incredible places, like, I don't know, up north, Kansas. It doesn't matter where you are. Nature is ready to adapt to your management. So we're start seeing small mesquite dying among the grass, and then mid-sized mesquite dying among the grass. Why? Because nature says, okay, we don't need you anymore. We'll cover the soil. Even the cows may not even need shade in the Chihuahuan desert. You know what one of my goals is, folks? To be able to walk barefoot in the summer in the Chihuahuan desert. That is kind of a crazy goal, but, well. So how about fires? What is the relationship between grazing and fires? I don't know if you're aware of this study from NASA that correlates, and this study was done here in California. It correlates moisture with the number of fires. So the drier the soil, the more prone you're going to be to get fires. Grasses are going to help us to keep the soils moist. I know that you guys work a lot in California with livestock. Well, I'm not sure about a lot, but you work with livestock, grazing as a service, trying to get rid of all this material to prevent fires. I don't think that's the main purpose of us doing that. I think the main purpose of doing that with livestock is to restore the water cycle, so we keep those soils moist. Because look at this picture. The left side is pretty common in US forests, the western US forest, is overprotecting the forests. So you're actually creating that ideal situation for a fire. The right side is a guy grazing the forest. See how nature, when you don't really have grass, nature is going to send something to cover the soil. And what is nature saying? Well, I need to cover the soil now with something else. And for me, guys, a natural fire is the last resource that nature says, let me do a reset. Because these guys are not managing well with all the consequences, right? It's like, okay, let's start all over again, guys, because I think you're not understanding how it works. But that is the purpose of having livestock, to restore the water cycle. This is on the high mountain range in Chihuahua. This ranch is the ranch with the highest elevation doing rechain, rational, holistic management. He's about 8,000 feet high. That's how we want to see our forests, guys. Pines and grasslands. But he's doing something pretty amazing in his ranch as well. He is killing the junipers. Did he plan to kill the junipers? No. They have no place on a forest. How much money we spend here in the US spraying juniper spraying cholla, spraying mesquite. Oh my God, I think we need to send the Dodge there on that stuff. Oops. Look, his ranch. Once he was able to establish the grasslands, the junipers are dying. How about the ponderosa pines? They are there. Because at some point we had such a large herds of elk and bison that it wasn't necessary, to do this kind of grazing management. Now, don't get me wrong, I just don't believe on rewilding the western US because there's so much fragmentation. I do believe that we should rewild by putting livestock, and then we're going to get all the wildlife that we want. So, well, don't pray for rain if you don't know what to do with it. That's a quote from an extension agent in the early 1900s. I was in, I think I need to speed up, right? No? What, 1 more hour? Okay. I was in India, and I was always promoting this stuff in a convention. And then I met some delegation from Germany, and they said, no, I don't want to talk about, we don't want to talk with you about cattle because it takes a lot of liters to produce 1 kilo of beef. The problem, folks, is that we're not seeing this holistically, the whole. Because I ran this test in bare ground in the Chubon Desert, and it only filtrates 2 inches of water per hour of rain. In a place where we've been working, now we can infiltrate 18 inches per hour. I don't even get half of that on a year, but we're ready when it rains. So if you extrapolate the difference between 18 and 2, we could meet the water needs for 100,000 people for a full year in our 30,000-acre ranch. That's what we're not seeing, folks. Well, we may see it, but some other people don't. The other thing is the small water cycle. I'm not sure if you have watched Walter Jenney, the Australian scientist, talking about this big water cycle, small water cycle. So we are responsible for the small water cycle because of evapotranspiration, infiltration, evapotranspiration, sitting the clouds, and then rain again. So we are losing about 40% we could potentially lose about 40% of the rainfall that is created inland and not coming from the sea. What we have seen in our ranches, this is not my ranch, it's another ranch in Chihuahua. What we have seen is that we ranchers doing this kind of management, we're getting up to 10% more rain than the other ranches. What is the acreage? I don't know, maybe it's 10,000 acres. I don't know what is the size, and then it will depend on the context, but I can tell you we're getting some extra rain. Not only if you trade more water, but getting extra rain. Now, every creature counts to regenerate. What do you think about this cow pie? You like it? Yeah, good, nice shape, right? You know what the problem is? It's still there. It shouldn't be there. Most likely, these guys are using ivermectin. We don't use ivermectin because we don't want to kill all that army of insects that are helping us regenerate, such as the dung beetles. This is a picture of my ranch. The dung beetles, obviously they need to have the right moist conditions and temperatures. Now people may say, well, yes, Alejandro, but in Mexico it's sunny and nice beaches and it doesn't get cold. Well, let me tell you something. You guys have more than 500 different dung beetles in the US. And when Paul, Gabe's son, was single, meaning he still have some time, he did a study on dung beetles, and he found more than 30 different dung beetles in North Dakota. I don't think you get colder than North Dakota. So there's everywhere. The problem is that we need to stop killing the dung beetles, otherwise we'll never get them. And this is the kind of work on side view, or the work that the dung beetles do. They put the majority of the cow pie into the soil. And that's why you see a lot of difference between neighboring ranches, one of the reasons, right, and my ranch, because we don't try not to kill anything. That's a cow pie that was worked by dung beetles and perhaps termites. Because termites also count. See, it's all about observing, folks, observation. I see this mesquite dying, and then I say, why is the branches just falling down? Because there's another beetle, it's not a dung beetle, but another beetle that was pruning the branches of mesquite that were getting weak. And then I saw the termites taking those branches and putting into the soil. So I'm not sure if you're aware that the mesquite is a legume. It put nitrogen into the soil. Well, now once I research what the termites do, termites are the ones that are now putting nitrogen into the soil. So see how nature will really never abandon you? You know, like, okay, now you don't have that mesquite, but now you're actually creating a context that will promote more of these insects that will help you put nitrogen into the soil. Even they're taking the oxidized grass, the termites. Yeah, I mean, I have some these cameras, and then we're seeing a lot of wildlife growing at the ranch. There's a lot of ranchers that are fully dedicated to hunting. If they could actually do proper livestock management, they will have more and more wildlife. We know by the cameras that we have more wildlife. And we've been working with the bird conservancy organizations in the US because the same birds that go and nest southern Canada and northern US, they go all the way to my ranch and other ranches in Chihuahua to winter. Now, thanks to this Modus tracking station, we know that we're getting the most numbers on all the stations that are being deployed south of the border. We are getting the most numbers of endangered birds. So what is good for the cows is good for the wildlife. And that is some of the birds that we're actually monitoring on that station. This is endangered. This is listed. Actually, they track one, and they're trying to come up with a story of one XYZ number coming all the way through the ranch from Canada with no tariffs. So most problems that we have as ranchers, they all fall into genetics or nutrition, folks. We've been talking a lot about nutrition, right? Better soils, better plants, more dense, high density plants, nutrient density plants. How about genetics? I explained to you these slides where we don't want to see loose manure. When we see loose manure, you have too much protein on the cows. That's why we like that aspect of gold and green. So letting the cows select, if you're putting hay, alfalfa, and something, like yellow. So livestock is so important, folks. You can see some pictures here on the same herd, the other ranches, same conditions, big differences. We're just waiting too long to get rid of some cows. We need to make it more dynamic. We need to make it more like a predator. You can see the difference between the bulls. Once people asked Lasseter, which was a great rancher from Colorado, Lasseter, please tell us how a bull should look like and a cow. Well, bulls should look like a bull and cows like a cow. Period. Sometimes we're selecting for bulls that don't look like bulls. Like these two bulls are in the same conditions. Look at the big difference. These are Hereford cows from the another, well, it's still in the Chihuahuan Desert. I mean, beautiful cow. I think it's a cow that is perfect for grass-fed. Short, white, heavy cow. And you know what this guy did? He was the mentor, my mentor, Billy Finan. Billy Finan, which is an Irish-Mexican guy, he closed the herd. He bought 300 bulls, the best bulls he could find in the US, Hereford bulls. The first year, he only got 30. He was a strong believer on selection and calling. His bulls. When I mentioned closed herd in Australia, they were like nuts, saying, "Oh my God, yeah, Alex, we know that you have two kinds of neighbors. The ones that think that you're crazy and the ones that know you're crazy." But the most advanced ranchers I know doing good grazing management, most of them have a closed herd or almost a closed herd. They're very keen into what they bring because remember, it's consistency. Every time you bring a bull, you gotta be very careful. And then I get tired of explaining about the closed herd to the Australians, and I say, okay, let's make a deal. In Mexico, when we have a calf with two heads, because a closed herd, we celebrate. You know why? Because we're gonna have more barbacoa. And then you have to work on your cows to adapt to your own context. We don't burn the thorns. They learn to break that path, scratch it in the soil, and eat it. And that's probably their culture of the herd. If you see an animal that does something you will like, just buy one of the cows and it will spread the knowledge in your herd. That's after dinner. And this is like a normal distribution of any herd. So through selection and culling, obviously we're trying to promote bull calves from the top performing cows. So we get the genetics back to the herd. But also we keep culling the bottom. We keep culling the bottom. I mean, we work on both ends in such a way that we go from where that bell curve to this one. And then just to summarize, folks, the difference between conventional and regen, we rely on a robust water system. We don't have creeks, we don't have springs, we have wells. We have water pipeline. We share the troughs into multiple paddocks. And that's the most costly investment, so that has to be well thought. And then we believe like events like this, I mean, we travel a lot to many ranches in whatever they were. We brought a lot of people from the outside when we were learning this stuff. And we also need to respect nature. I haven't really seen any shortcut that works. I mean, just need to be patient. And the less rain you get, the more patient you need to be. We like the mob grazing, short duration, long rest periods. And then I used to have 40 pastures when I joined the ranch 15 years ago. Now we have permanent one wire electric fence, we have 350. And then we can subdivide those, like a strip grazing, no back fence, into 1,000, depending on the year. Remember, I told you, my flexibility is on the size of the paddock. And we believe on long rest periods. We try to have the least possible herds, folks. Why? Because I have only two people, the foreman and a cowboy, to manage 500 cows. But I want to duplicate those to 1,000 cows with the same people. So how I'm gonna achieve that? Well, I'm gonna get rid of the cows that take extra time. No calving issues. I mean, we don't use vaccination. We keep our own, mostly our own bulls. anything, because otherwise they will not be able to, and then keep as few herds as possible. We have the bulls, one. We have the cow cows, which usually are with the bulls. And then everything else, the saddle horses are not using, mares, donkeys, and cows are all in one herd. You should see when we put the donkeys there the first time. Everybody runs on the different directions because they've never seen a donkey. Then we raise our own bulls and keep our own heifers. We don't sell the heifers. We go and do ongoing selection. We believe on multiple species. We try to calve during the growing season, but we used to calve like very late in the year because we have a very short growing season in the beginning, but our growing season is extending now. So we have now a little bit of green year round, now allow us to go the calving season in the spring, even before the monsoon, before the rains. And you need to see your ranch as a laboratory. I mean, experiment. That is really very important. Now, we're going to share later on some other things with you on the field walk, and then hang out with like-minded people. That is very important. This is my dad. Let me tell you briefly a story. When I got in my mentor, Jesus Almeida, a holistic management practitioner, I was very lucky, guys, because I landed, my ranch happened to be where they were the best holistic management practitioners in Mexico, which was in Chihuahua. And when Jesus went to my ranch, it was all bare ground, rocks and bare ground, and gray grass, oxidized grass. And he told me, Alex, you haven't thought about something. What you do is going to give more years of life to your dad. My dad is 92 now. That's a picture from last year. I can tell you that my dad is still living because of the work we do at the ranch. And this is a video of how some of our grasslands look like now. I think we were born to see beautiful things, folks. We were not born to deal with hot temps in this bare ground, lack of life, lack of productivity, lack of profitability. I think that's really give us a lot of peace of mind and probably some like a therapy when you see grasslands. Thank you.
We do have some time for some questions, and we also have a great opportunity with Alejandro or Alex later today out in the field. So there's going to be a great opportunity for interaction and learning from his expertise and his experiences. But does someone have a question or comment they'd like to begin? Okay, right here in the front.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing. I just wonder what you use instead of ivermectin, if you have an alternative.
Yeah, every change that we made, I mean, what do we use instead of ivermectin? I'm just trying to rephrase the question, right? So every change that we make it slowly. Like there was a point in time where we say, why are we winning? Don't the cows supposed to be winning? And then we started realizing, we started increasing the age until we got into 8 months, and then the cows were still winning, and now we start calling. So the answer to your question is calling. Because the problem sometimes we have as ranchers is we see, let's say, some ticks on the cattle. Let's treat them all. Or we see, and I have a question for you on that, I mean for everybody. Who makes the decision on when to move or what the size of the paddock is? Is it poor performing cattle? Because we tend, when we see a herd, we tend to see the poor performing cattle because it's in our nature, you know, we will predate them. We will eat them. because they cannot run, they are weak. But the problem is that we are making the decisions on the poor performers. So the more you cull, the more you get rid of those poor performers, the better decisions you're going to make. So the only way that we were able to get rid of ivermectin is both better nutrition, better grasses, better soils, and better genetics adapted to, yeah. But we start slowly. We always put a target, say, okay, this year we're going to get rid of 5% of the poor condition cows or ticks or something, and then we increase to 10. If it is a drought, then we increase it big time. We're always trying to make it in an orderly way, trying to push the bar, saying, okay, now I'm going to push a little bit. I'm going to wean older calves. So let's see, okay, now I got to get rid of. So it's all about culling. I mean, culling is a great tool we have as ranchers to get cattle adapted with not so many crutches, right? Sure, you're welcome.
I recall you saying you move your cattle twice a day. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to move them that often. What are things that I can look for to make sure that I'm not overgrazing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So what are things that we need to see to make sure that you're not overgrazing? I think we need to first define what is overgrazing, right? So for me, there's different ways to overgraze. I think I mentioned one to you is, okay, you're doing a great job, but then you're going too soon to the same paddock. See, I think I missed telling you guys that we work with the bird conservancy organizations, right? And they do transects for the birds, but also they do transects for the plants. So 10 years ago, they told me we have about 20 different grasses. 2 years ago, they told me we have 80 different grasses. And then we're still way to go. So that is part because we're mob grazing, the herd effect, but also the long rest periods. So I don't mind if you take a lot, as long as you provide enough rest for the grass to recover. I mean, and then remember that the cows are really very kind of complicated, I mean, they are kind of like chemists saying, I take a little bit of this, I take a little bit of that, I take a little bit of that. So it may not be like so uniform, but I think it's more the time you spend on the paddock. And then don't actually even worry about you grazing like a new growth. Because some people think like, we were in Mongolia like last year with the Nature Conservancy. And what the Chinese government said, okay, don't graze during the spring, so they are feeding the cows in the spring. I don't think that's necessary. I think if you provide long rest period and then a good diet between gall and green, then the cow will perform well, and then we're giving it 18 months because it's getting even more challenging. But don't worry too much about overgrazing. I think is how you can fix overgrazing is, okay, stay as short as is feasible, I mean not too long, but then also provide a rest period enough to actually promote diversity. So the grass, remember, we were taught that the best time to graze a grass is at the put stage, right? Like, okay, good. I mean, I do believe that the grasses have a nice balance between energy and protein when they're forming the seed. But sometimes that theory is coming from the eastern US, which is completely different, or from other parts that have more rain. Here, I think, well, I'm not sure, I'm not very familiar with this country, but a lot of the parts in the western US is all about diversity. How can I make my ranch more resilient? And then one key aspect is, okay, putting the fertility from the livestock, but also providing long rest periods. Remember that the migrations of the bison, as well as the buffalo in Africa, they went down one way and came back a different way. So imagine the time that it took them to graze the same spot. So yeah, I don't know. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I also would like to thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge with us. I want to go back to one of the slides in which you showed deeply eroded ground, deep gullies. In that type of environment, what is your approach to erosion control in areas of deep gullying and erosion?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I'm gonna have to change a little bit, the way we approach that, because the question is on that big gully that we saw, how we would deal with that gully. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example. My neighbor, which I'm so happy that I have two of my neighbors on board of this kind of management. Because I told the bird guys, I call it the bird guys, American Bird Conservancy, Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, Audubon. The bird guys, I told the bird guys, because we work with them, I cannot stand alone. I mean, it's not sustainable in my ranch is the only ranch with grass. So now I have two neighbors that are working with the bird conservancies of the US, and now they have a better management. So one of my neighbors have a very large ranch, 80,000 acres. 80,000 acres, yeah, that's a big ranch. But a lot of the ranch is bare ground. But you see that gully, that part of that gully is part of his ranch. I mean, along the way. And all that water ends it up in a spot that is almost like an sub-irrigated pasture. It's not, because no irrigation, but yeah, it's sub-irrigated. So that is about probably 15,000 acres of such a nice land out of the 80,000. Do you know what I told my neighbor and what I told when I do consult? Show me your best pastures. And then I told my neighbor, if you're gonna invest money, you gotta invest money there. Because for us, the most important thing is how can we keep the rancher going. We can save the world, but we have to save the ranchers. And the ranchers need to be profitable. And that's why we always ask the ranchers, show me your best. I'm not here to prove you that I can fix the worst of your land. I'm here to actually make it to get results next year. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years. So if we just focus on the worst areas, it's gonna increase the risk. And the return on investment, as any return, folks, the longer it takes, the time it takes, the more risk is gonna get involved. So our approach is work on the most productive areas first, get your trust, get results, and then start moving from the best areas to the worst areas. So that gully, see, the thing is on that stuff is, remember I told you that everything is just moving, right? Moving, better or worse. Obviously, my neighbor is gonna get worse on the worst areas, but it's gonna protect their still biological assets. I know if I'm explaining myself on this. So don't get focused too much on the worst. Go and try to work on the closest area that still have some grass, but it needs some work. Like I have I don't think you're too far from Oregon, right? No, okay, so I went to a ranch in Oregon, and this guy has a big ranch that they bought, and they have a riparian area with a creek. You're gonna work on that creek. Why? It looks good. Wait, I want you to build trust on this approach. And then that was enough for him to work on the creek with small paddocks, daily moves for just 1 month to know the potential of livestock in a good area. And then he's going to the average areas and then to the end of the worst areas. So to answer your question, I wouldn't really be working on that gully. I know there's ways, but they're very expensive ways. And then the acreage is gonna be pretty small. So for the case of my neighbor, I'm trying to get the inputs to zero. He used to have cattle spread all about the 80,000 acres, wild cattle. Now he has control on the cattle. He put water there. He put electric fence there. He's moving every 2 days, and now he can actually go year-round with no inputs. That is my answer. Yeah.
Buenos días, Alejandro. Gracias por estar aquí. Un placer. My question is, I loved how you highlighted donkeys for diversifying your livestock. I just wanted to ask if you started from the beginning introducing the species, or what time you introduced them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the question relates to the donkeys. If I knew what I know today, it would be much cheaper for me. I mean, because the ranch really look terrible, like many places in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, so on. I would have bought a bunch of donkeys before actually keeping. I would have probably sold all my cows, because anyway, my cows were really also in pretty bad genetics. I mean, we never selected to call anything. We just were feeding for 6 months. And I would have bought a bunch of donkeys that are cheap, get the place to a point where I can bring cattle and then keep going, and then sell the donkeys. But yeah, I mean, I think donkeys can take a lot, because nobody has really spoiled a donkey unless it's a miniature donkey, but nobody cares about the donkey. So they are really great tools to regenerate. I don't know, did I answer your question? Yeah.
So I'm next, and
Where?
here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for being here, and I think I'm about to ask a dumb question, but my question is, when you talked about the difference between the two cows, and you said
Yes.
it's genetics, is this just genetics, or is it also how much they're feeding, like what kind of grazing? Because just like humans, if we eat too much, we're gonna grow bigger, ultimately change the genetic composition. So is it just that, or is it the amount of food that they're eating?
Yeah, thanks for your question. So is there any other condition, right, for that difference? I would say just for us, we call it just genetics. It could be epigenetics or it could be genetics, but those cows were really given the same opportunity to graze the same stuff. So we are very keen, because you know, fat has a lot of relationship with pregnancy on livestock. So we really want cows to be in good body condition. So, and that also means that we will spend less inputs, right? Because if you see that cow, that thin cow, then it may really need that extra feed. But what we do in that case is not that we're just gonna get rid of all the cows. Like, I wanna give you an example. One of my friends, the son of my mentor, he moved from a more, let's say, traditional holistic management, 50 pastures, to hundreds of pastures or paddocks. And then he told me, Alex, just come on over and see my cows. And he has, I mean, this is not related to breeds, guys. I'm not really want to get into the breeds. I mean, there's great Hereford, great Angus, great, and there's poor Corrientes, poor, I mean, even poor bison. But you have to keep that selection and calling from the best animals and keep the best animals. So this guy showed me that he has these red cows that happen to be beef masters, and he was grazing to the bottom, but he wasn't really taking a look at the cow's well-being. Because if you ask me who's driving the management at the ranch, is the cows. Because we need to keep the cows' well-being first, the body condition. But you have to work with what you have. I mean, you cannot have better than what you have. So well, let me move here. Oh, yeah, I cannot see you. So the thing is that those two cows were on the same conditions. Now, when I was with my friend, all the black cows really looked terrible. Like, oh my God, he's gonna kill the cows. And his dad wasn't really happy. And the red cows were doing great. And I told Juan Pablo, my friend, Juanpa, really, if you have all red cows, I would say, congratulations, you're doing a great job. But you're doing a terrible job, because at the end of the day, you ended up working with the poor performing animals, right? You wanna bring them back. So I say, Juan Pablo, you need to open up more grazing, because your herd at this current condition cannot sustain what you're doing. So open up. because you ended up working with the poor performing cows. Now that's when you say, okay, I'm gonna get rid of the 10% worse of this. So if I, let's say, if I set a target of 24% per year, just on body condition or whatever problem they have, even besides pregnancy, then that means that is 2% per month. If I'm calling and selling every month or every 2 months, then I'm looking at the 2% of the bottom. Now that could vary, that percentage, because it's in a drought, then you need to get rid of more cows instead of feeding. So it's always, we prefer always to call. So in those 2 cows, if we're gonna get rid of 50%, then the thin cow should go. And then we're gonna get the bulls from the cows that don't require anything. So that's how you start improving your genetics. Did I answer? So? No? Yes? Right.
So how does that factor in? Those cows still produce milk?
Yeah, they do produce the milk. I think the question there is what cow really requires more feed to produce the milk, you know? Because, and let me give you an example. In southern Mexico, 80% of what the cows eat is brought from the outside. So see the side effects, the domino effect that we have outside of the ranch? If you want to really prove like your ranch is resilient, close the gate. I mean, close the gate. What are you gonna be doing? You have enough water? You have enough feed? So we don't really know how much is wasted just to keep those cows, because milk is really a high maintenance stuff, you know, they really need energy more than protein. So it's those side effects that we are actually getting rid of a lot of grasslands to feed the cows on a ranch that is really not doing such a great job. I mean, and it's all about, sometimes it's not eliminating, but minimizing. Like I know in the northern US, maybe it's like snow is too hard, and then instead of feeding for 6 months, they should be targeting for 2 months. Yeah, but let's see the whole context, you know? Yep. Sure, welcome. Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to the donkeys. Why did you choose donkeys over, say, goats or sheep? And how is their grazing pattern different, their impact on the land? Why did you choose them? And then how do you incorporate them into your grazing program overall? Just more donkey thoughts, please.
Yeah, why we choose donkeys instead of goats, or, well, I think there's better complementation between, let's say, goats and cows than sheep and cows, or donkeys and cows, because they really eat very different. You could see a donkey as a big goat, but you don't have to change the fence, and then they will go up and down on my mountain range. I mean, I want to graze the whole thing. Even if my cows cannot reach the top, it's important to grow grass on the top, because that's where it starts, the flow of the water. So I want to graze, and then also for wildlife, because wildlife nowadays is not enough to actually regenerate the land. We work with a bison rancher that has thousands of bison, millions of acres. Oh my God, you should see that conversation. I mean, that was not really very pleasant to be there, because they said, no, you cannot control the bison, because that ranch was bought for that purpose, because bison will regenerate the land. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's not, because the conditions are completely different. Even if you have 2 million acres, the conditions are completely different than the great migration that used to have. So they ended up actually controlling the bison, and they're not going back. So the donkeys, the decision was, okay, it's an animal that we can incorporate into the herd. It's part of the herd. I mean, we're not separate the cows from the donkeys or the mares and the horses. We used to have, we put everything together first, like horses and mares, horses and mares and cows, and then we incorporate the donkeys. With the purpose of actually having a more even grazing. But because goats and, we have sheep, but it's not part of the herd. The goats may require something extra. And the donkeys are pretty much they're, as I say, nobody cares about the donkeys. Yep.
And you don't have a market for the donkeys?
Well, you can sell donkeys in Mexico. You can sell donkeys, yeah. They aren't really like the price of a sheep, probably. But yeah, I see donkeys as a cover crop. Like, okay, people may say, oh my God, I cannot have cover crops or service crops, however you call it, because it's taking the water. Oh, I cannot have donkeys because it's taking the grass. Well, it's helping, to improve your grasses and to improve everything. It's like a service crop. Yep.
Alejandro, I have one last question here, if I may.
Yeah.
There's a rancher that's been practicing holistic management for well over a decade, probably more like almost 20 years, and has not been able to change much in the way of species. A couple of perennials are coming back, and of course there's history that says that these hills on the western side of California had perennials, but they've not been able to really shift out of the annual invasion, the invasive species like foxtail, et cetera, that seem to be dominant and seem to have really shifted the whole bioregion from the standpoint of what species want to function now. I'm not sure we can ever recover what was. What are your thoughts about that? You've shown really good examples of mesquite, et cetera, being pushed out, cactus, et cetera, when the grasses come. But when we've shifted from perennials to an annual that seems pretty aggressive, is there a way to shift that?
Yeah, well, thanks for your question. I have seen some of those. I'm not sure where the ranch is, but I think we work with some ranchers near San Francisco on the Bay. And I think, first of all, we really need to look at what's the history of the place. Because even in my ranch, they have a small acreage where they were growing like corn and things. I really haven't seen much of a difference there because we lost like 1 meter of topsoil. That's where we're finding this native stuff there. What happened before? Chemicals, tillage, I think that's going to affect us a lot. Now, the other thing is that I have seen, for example, ranchers. I met some great ranchers in Montana, Icalaca. I don't even know where I was going, and I was surprised because they were running 300 cows on rangeland, and they were having problem with the invasive grasses, non-native grasses. But they were just there, and then they crunch numbers and they say, we're gonna sell the cows, we're gonna put a good water system, and then we're gonna get to the stockers. Now, they are not running anymore the 300 cows, but they're running 2,000 yearlings. That's what I really saw, the native grasses coming up. They had 2 herds of 1,000. See, guys, we can actually talk about the pounds per acre, right? So if I tell you I have 10 cows, 100 cows in 1 acre is 100,000 pounds per acre, right? Instead, I have 1,000 cows in 10 acres. Is the same number? No way. Because it seems like there's something special about the bear herds. If a rancher doesn't have cows, and he asks me, hey, should I buy cows? With the whole purpose of regenerating, should I buy? No, just get some animals from the outside, yearlings, steers, heifers, run it for a couple of months, and you're done. You will get more benefit by grazing big herds. As long as you have the water, right? Quickly, and then rest it. You make money, than instead of just you trying to care for the cows you're around, you don't have enough animal, even though it may seem like you're doing the same pounds per acre, it will never be the same. So now I'm seeing tall grasses in Montana, but they told me we have never seen that before, and it's taking over the native grasses. So yeah, it's about also kind of like the size of the herd. Thank you.